Hello, everybody, and welcome to One Question with Pastor Adam. And I am Adam, and I am pastor to believers and to doubters, to unfaithful Christians and to faithful atheists. And friends, Jesus was not afraid of questions, and neither are we here at One Question with Pastor Adam. So we are going to ask the questions. A couple of weeks ago, 2 episodes ago, we talked about the Bible and myths of the ancient world. And oftentimes the Bible is thought of as just another ancient myth. And we did a lot of work 2 weeks ago discussing Cain and Abel and Romulus and Remus. Cain and Abel, you recognize from the Bible, and Romulus and Remus is a Roman myth about the gods Romulus and Remus and how they were brothers and got into this big fight over who would create the city of Rome, right? Who would be the founder of Rome? And it ended up being that Romulus defeats and kills his brother Remus and ends up becoming a god. And you can check out the other episode. That was in connection with the Cain and Abel myth, where in the story of Cain and Abel, Cain kills his brother Abel and he founds like the first city. He creates the first city in the Bible, but God does not approve. God does not approve of Cain's actions. In fact, God says to Cain, "Where's your brother?" And Cain is like, "Am I my brother's keeper?" And of course, the answer is yes to that. Well, in the Roman myth, the Roman telling of the story, Romulus's murder of his brother is seen as justified by the gods, not just justified, but ordained by the gods, because out of this act of violence, something good happens. The creation of the eternal city, Rome, right? So here you start to see a fundamental difference between how the Bible is telling stories and how ancient myths generally told stories. In the Bible, you end up hearing the cry of the victim of violence. Abel's blood cries out to God, and God hears the cry of the victim. This is like the story of the Israelites as they are oppressed by Egypt, and they cry out, and God hears their cry and works for their deliverance. So you can check out more of that episode from 2 episodes ago. So today I wanted to do a part 2, because oftentimes we hear that the Jesus story is just another myth. The Jesus story is like the other stories. In fact, maybe the Jesus story is stealing or appropriating from other myths. Particularly, you may have heard the story of Horus and Osiris, and that Jesus is just another retelling of these ancient myths. Now, it's interesting because if you go and you actually read these ancient myths, you will see that there aren't a lot of similarities in the way that these stories are told. And if you hear actual scholars talk about this, they will tell you there are not a lot of similarities going on here. So hi, Jeff. Good to see you. And I wanted to explore this a little bit with you today from one of my favorite books that I have, World Mythology. It looks like a high school textbook, and maybe it is. It's the second edition, an anthology of the great myths and epics. It's got all kinds of amazing stuff in here. I think I got it when I lived in Chicago at a like half-priced books. It was my favorite bookstore in Chicago, and found it there. So if you can get your hands on one of these kinds of ancient world mythology books, it's just fascinating stuff. So hi, Annalie and Luke. Good to see you, my friend. I'm not sure where you are leading us on the YouTube there with that link, Luke, but I also wanted to put a link here on YouTube for those of you who are watching live. And hey, if you are listening to the podcast, special shout out to you. Thank you for being here. And so here is the story on YouTube. And if you're listening on the podcast, if you want to just put in the search engine of YouTube, um, you can just put in the search engine there, Horus, Set, and Osiris, and you will come up with this amazing 10-minute video that tells the story of this myth. And I'm going to try to tell it to you from this book, World Mythology. But there, if you're interested, uh, yeah, mythology only becomes mythology when a new religion destroys it. I like that, Luke. That's good stuff. So we are live here, Joshua. Good to see you. Good day to all of you. Myth is fun. I love these myths. And Barbara from Tallahassee, Florida, welcome, welcome. Good to see you. So as I'm talking about these myths, I don't want you to hear me, as I said last time, like talking down about these myths. These stories are stories that humans tell that try to make sense of the world in which we live. And stories are a powerful way of making that kind of sense. Science is also an important way of making sense about the world in which we live. They're telling it from different perspectives. These myths, these stories of the ancient world are all trying to tell us like the meaning behind what it means to be human. They're asking I what was presented to me in college when I took my religious studies class as like ultimate questions that humans have been asking for millennia, since the beginning of humanity. We've been asking these kinds of questions. So these are stories that are trying to get at a deeper truth about what it means to be human. And the story of Horus and Osiris and Isis take are Egyptian stories, Egyptian myths about the way that the world works. And there's a lot of details here. And invite you to go to YouTube and watch the video there. It's fascinating stuff. But what happens is that there are the gods, and the mother god and the father god. The father god is like Re, the sun god of Egypt, and Re ends up, doing what gods do, having sex, right, and producing children gods. So Osiris and Set are brothers, and Isis is their sister. Osiris and Isis end up getting married. Yeah, some incest here happening among the gods, right? But what are you gonna do? They're the only ones who are around. So they end up getting married, and they have children themselves. And one of their children ends up being Horus. Now, Osiris, before they have Horus, is the king god of Egypt. And he does such a great job. He and Isis are loved by the Egyptians. Everybody loves them. They're doing really great work leading Egypt. And what happens when you have a brother who is like the star of the show and you look at him? What happens? Well, we saw with Cain and Abel 2 weeks ago, and Romulus and Remus. There are jealousies that end up happening between brothers, right? And so Set is Osiris's brother, and Set gets very jealous of Osiris and plans for ways to kill him because Set wants what Osiris has. Osiris is the king, and Set wants to be the king. He wants to be the man on top. And so Set ends up developing a plan to kill his brother Osiris. Osiris does such a great job in Egypt, by the way, that Osiris wants to expand his territory. So he goes out to other nations and starts talking to them and telling them how they should run their nations. And Osiris is just like getting more and more prestige the more work that he does, which makes his brother Set more and more jealous. So while Osiris is out in the world getting more Osiris fans, Set develops a plan to kill his brother when he comes back. So his plan is Set creates a box, a rectangular box that is fit to the exact size of his brother Osiris. And Set, when Osiris comes back, Set throws a big party for him and invites everybody to come to the party. And At the party, Set has made agreements with 70 of the elders of Egypt, and they devise this plan. They make this basically a coffin, but they don't call it a coffin. They call it a beautiful box. And they say, whoever fits perfectly in the box can have the box. Like, you are the owner of the box. So everybody gets into the box and nobody fits. And so some people are too tall, some people are too short. Well, where's the Goldilocks of this whole thing? Right? Who's the Goldilocks here? Well, sure enough, Osiris gets in and he's the Goldilocks. He is the perfect. He's just right. Like, he fits perfectly. And so Osiris is like, I'll hop in. So he hops in, and then they shut the coffin, the box, on him, and they hammer it down. They even pour like magma or hot lead over the box so that Osiris can never open it. And so then they throw it into the Nile River, and it goes down the Nile River, and Osiris suffocates and dies. What a story. I know, right? Family intrigue, sibling rivalry, it's all there. It's just fascinating stuff. Now, if you're listening to this and you're like, what the heck? Here's what this myth is telling us. This is what humans have known from the beginning, is that violence is the way to solve violence, right? Because Osiris is murdered. He goes down the river, and Isis, Osiris's wife, goes out in search for her husband, as anybody probably would, right? She eventually finds him, and their father, named Thoth, one of the father gods, gives her a spell in order to bring Osiris back to life, to resurrect Osiris. And so she gets the box, she gets it open, and she does this spell on Osiris, and it only brings Osiris back to life for a short period of time. And during that time, Osiris and Isis, they get it on. Did you like that? Did you like that sound effect? Woohoo! That was good, right? So they end up, doing what gods do when they have a little bit of time together, and they do their thing. And then Osiris has their child Horus, and Horus grows up and ends up having a conversation with his dad Osiris. And I want to bring it to you here. Here's the money quote from this myth. So Osiris decided the time had come to deal with his brother Set. Yeah, this is about revenge. That's what that's what this resurrection story is. He tested Horus's readiness to avenge his father's murder by killing Set. So Osiris asks his son, Horus, what is the most glorious deed a man can perform? All kinds of options here, right? Like Horus could come up with almost anything here. What is the most glorious deed that a man can perform? And Horus replies, to take revenge upon one who has injured his father and mother. Really? That's the most glorious thing? To take revenge? Revenge, the glory of revenge. That is what this story is about. That is what so much of human history is about too. Somebody hits you, you proclaim your manhood, womanhood, personhood, and the way that you do that is to hit them back, to strike back harder. We still live under this myth. I mean, it wasn't too long ago, after 9/11, our response was, you remember, shock and awe. You hit us, we're gonna get revenge, and we're gonna hit you back all the more. I remember having a conversation about that with one of my family members, and I was like, "This is not Christian. Like, shock and awe. Can you imagine Jesus doing this?" And this conservative Christian family member was like, "Oh no, it's Christian. Yeah, that's what we should be doing." And I was like, "What? What? How? You're living under the myth. You're living under the myths that Walter Wink calls it, the myth of redemptive violence." If you have not read Walter Wink and you're interested in all of this, myth of redemptive violence stuff. I cannot recommend Walter Wink enough. The Powers That Be is Walter Wink's amazing book that kind of summarizes all of it. He's got big like a 3-part book series about the myth of redemptive violence. But there's a short book that summarizes all of it. Highly recommend that if you're interested. Walter Wink, The Powers That Be. He talks about like ancient myths and how they tell this story of the myth of redemptive violence, and how we supposedly Christian nation continue to enact the myth of redemptive violence, thinking that violence is what's going to redeem us. So anyway, so Horus says to his father, the most glorious deed a man can perform is to take revenge upon one who has injured his father or mother. And so Osiris resurrects. And what does Osiris want? This is a resurrection story. This is typical amongst the resurrection stories of the ancient world. Gods resurrect in order to get revenge on those who have murdered them or harmed them in the past. That's what this is about. So what ends up happening is Horus ends up growing first, actually. Horus, here's the resurrection story of Horus. When Horus was young, his mother Osiris took him into hiding. But Set, the evil god, ends up finding Horus while Osiris is out in the marketplace buying food, and ends up having a scorpion bite Horus in order to kill him. So Osiris comes back and wants to feed her son Horus, who's still like a toddler at this time, and sees that Horus is dead. And so what does Osiris do? She does the magic words that she got from her father god Thoth, and she says the magic words over her son Horus and brings him back to life. So here Horus has this resurrection moment, and he resurrects in order to get revenge on Set for killing him and for killing his father. Welcome to resurrection, everybody. So oh man, it's awesome. So Horus ends up growing up, becoming strong. He's a farmer and does hard labor, gets strong, becomes a warrior, ends up going to war against Set 3 times, ends up, here's one of the brilliant parts of this story, is that Horus ends up defeating Set and taking Set basically to be a prisoner. But Set, the evil god, calls out for mercy, and Horus is not going to give him mercy. But do you know who does give him mercy? Osiris, Horus's mother, gives her brother Set mercy. Osiris hears the cry of Set, this person who has been her enemy all of this time, and her heart breaks for her brother, and she ends up stopping Horus from making Set a prisoner, and she frees Set, her enemy. And Horus responds in a fit of rage. This is what the myth of redemptive violence does. It gets us into cycles of violence that end up escalating to extremes. You can't control your own violence because it just escalates out of control. That is, if you're looking at a moral to the story of this ancient Egyptian myth, because what ends up happening is that Horus gets so angry and violent against his own mother that he goes after her with the same aggressiveness that he fought against Set, the same anger, the same hatred that he fights against Set. He goes after towards his mother, and he ends up chopping off his mother's head, killing his mother. And Thoth, one of the other gods, sees this happening and ends up creating a new head for Isis, which is the head of a cow and the horns of a cow. So Isis is killed by her own son, whom she has encouraged to kill Set. Do you see how this story, if you have uh, certain eyes to see what this story is getting at, part of the truth of this story is that violence is going to run out of control. You are not going to control violence. Violence is going to control you. And pretty soon, you're not only going after your evil uncle, you're also going after your mom, who is so compassionate and loving that she even loves those she calls her enemies. You're going to chop her head off and you're going to kill her too. Why? Because violence runs out of control. So there's a certain way in which you can read these ancient myths as anti-violence, as a warning for how violence runs out of control. You can do the same, by the way, with the Bible. You read the book of Judges, and you find that the people before they have a king, the people of Israel have judges, and they only rise up whenever Israel is about to be destroyed, or an army is about to come, and then they need somebody to like run their armies, right? And so they're like, okay, we need another judge. Who's going to rise up? So a judge rises up, and they're like, okay, let's go to war against these people. And what ends up happening? Well, they might defeat the other people who are coming in for battle, but it doesn't solve the problem. It just like more and more and more violence ends up happening. So you know the story of David and Goliath is another example where David ends up killing Goliath. And a little later on, David goes in search of Goliath's sword, and he picks up Goliath's sword, and he ends up using Goliath's sword. This is part of the details that they don't tell you in Sunday school, right? David chops off Goliath's head, and then goes off in search of Goliath's sword. And the Bible is telling us, like, you know, the Nietzsche quote where Nietzsche says, "Be careful of fighting monsters lest you become a monster." That is the logic of violence that the Bible is giving us. David ends up becoming the monster that Goliath was, even using his own sword. Like, you read the story, the David story, it ain't pretty. It ain't pretty. He does a lot of killing, and so you can read these ancient stories in an anti-violent way, including this one from ancient Egypt. Like, violence is going to run you. You're not going to run violence. It's going to run your life if you give yourself over to it. But I wanted to bring this story up to you because a lot of people claim that the Horus narrative is basically the same pattern of the Jesus narrative. Now, as I'm telling you the story 2 weeks ago, when I told you the story of Cain and Abel and the comparison to Romulus and Remus, I'm hoping you got the distinction between the way that those two stories tell the story, right? And here I'm hoping you get the distinction between the Horus, Osiris, Isis story and the Jesus resurrection story. Osiris and Horus both resurrect, indeed. Yeah. And what do they resurrect to do? To seek revenge. Jesus resurrects, and people kill him. His enemies kill him. Jesus resurrects, and as the story goes, Jesus enters into the upper room where his disciples are scared. They're scared. And Jesus enters in there. And what are the first words that he says? Let's get revenge on those damn Romans. No, he says, peace be with you. Peace be with you. That's the radical difference. That's the radical difference. Jesus says, peace be with you. Go out into the nations and make disciples. Now, that can be interpreted in very, bad, horrible ways. But how does Jesus make disciples during his lifetime? He heals people. He preaches that God's kingdom is coming here on earth as it is in heaven. And what does that look like? It looks like when people are healed for free. It looks like a woman who has been suffering from hemorrhages her whole life, and she's given her money away to all kinds of first century doctors, and they just take her money and they don't give her any relief. And here comes Jesus, the great physician. He doesn't charge her anything. She comes up to him and touches his robe, takes some power away from him. And Jesus looks back and he says, "Who touched my robe? I'm going to kill you right now. I'm going to get revenge on you." No, he says, "Who touched my robe?" And he says, "Daughter, your faith has made you well." Oh, 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 I love the Jesus story. How can you not love that? How can you not see that that's so beautiful? Whether you think like I personally I get a lot of people on my TikTok who are like, "Oh, Jesus never lived. Uh it's just a made up story," stuff like that. And you know what? If that's where you're at, that's fine. I I'm not here to convince you otherwise. I believe that there is enough great, good evidence that Jesus existed. All scholars, even atheist scholars, reputable atheist scholars believe reputable. Did I say that? Reputable scholars, atheist, secular, know that this person existed. Uh, Now, whether this person did all of the miracles, whether this person rose from the dead, that is all debatable based on faith. But you look at the way that the story is told and how Jesus does not seek revenge against people, and when people like the woman have been abused by her people in her culture and by physicians, and Jesus like turns around and is like, "Who did that?" It's like when God, sort of like when God goes in the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve are hiding, and God says, "Where are you? Who touched me?" Not that this woman had done anything wrong in her life, but she hasn't been seen. She hasn't been hiding herself, but she's been basically cast out and unseen. And Jesus basically says to her, "I want to see you. I want to know who you are." Right? Because nobody has known this woman. They have just ignored her the whole time. And that's what we tend to do with people, with outcasts, right? We tend to, I mean, the homeless today, how many times do I walk by the homeless without even looking at them, without acknowledging their humanity? I am as guilty as that as anyone else. I hope not. Maybe you aren't, but I, in the midst of all of that suffering, I feel helpless. Jesus enters into that suffering, says, "Who touched me?" Acknowledges this woman's humanity, heals her so that she can be brought back into a loving community. And hopefully, that community is what we call the church, a way where people who have been neglected, abused, cast aside by the church, by our culture, can end up finding a home, to know that they're loved. Mm. So I was not planning to talk about the woman who was hemorrhaging for how many years was it? 14 years or something like that. Uh, anyway, so the resurrection narratives, Jesus resurrects in order to spread more peace in the world, whereas so many myths are about the gods resurrecting for revenge, to get back at the people who betrayed them, to get back at their enemies. So that's a pretty big distinction there. So, so again, that's from this book I have, World Mythology. Also put the link to a YouTube video that tells the story of Osiris and Isis and Set and Horus. It's fascinating stuff. I just love it. And again, like you can see how our ancient siblings, ancient humans, would come up with these kinds of stories. The world seems to run on violence, and it seems as though that the way to make peace is through violence and destroying our enemies. And so, if that's basically what we have been trained to believe, we're going to start telling stories about how that's true and how that's part of the fundamental reality of life. and hopefully somebody comes along and shows us a different way out of the myth of redemptive violence. So that's what I got for you today. Hope that was interesting. Let's go to some comments. So, hi Jeff, good to see you. Luke, looking forward to seeing the video that you put in there. And Annalie, good to see you, my friend. Yeah, Barbara from Tallahassee, Florida area. Barbara, good to see you. Let's see. Lita says, good morning, everyone. So glad to be here with you today. Good to see you, Lita. A Jeff says, a myth is as good as a mile. It's good. Joshua says, it's as if myth can say what religion cannot. Learning about myth was fluidity. Learning about myth with fluidity could help regulate religious obligations, right? Joshua, I need to talk with you a little bit more about that question. Yeah, I think that's good. I think myth and religion are, I mean, the way that I see it, I could be wrong, but yeah, myths grow out of my guru on all of this is Rene Girard. I've talked about Girard many times before, but Girard says that religion grows out of sacrifice. There's this kind of war of all against all. This is a very simplified version of it. There's this kind of war of all against all, but before humans, when we're still in our hominid state, and then this war of all against all that threatens the community. Somebody points the finger at an individual who gets blamed for all of it, and then they sacrifice that individual. There's temporary peace. This is Walter Wink's book. Describes this really, really well. So if you want a good, quick summary of this birth of religion, Walter Wink's The Powers That Be is a great source for this too. And you can see how the myth of redemptive violence grows out of this, because there's this war of all against all, and it gets channeled against an individual. So it's a war of all against one, and that individual is sacrificed. And soon there's a sense of peace that emerges amongst the community. There's enough peace so that they can work together and start forming culture. Now, this takes place over thousands and thousands of years, right? So, but this is the process of hominization, of becoming human, and so religion grows out of that violent sacrifice. Violence produces religion. Religion, in this ancient way, is seen as a way of channeling, of containing violence in two senses. Religion contains violence in that religion has violence within it, right? But religion also contains violence in the sense of having a container for violence. So instead of this war of all against all, where we're going to have a civil war and we're all going to kill ourselves, it is contained in a sense in which it is channeled against an individual. And out of this develops stories about how the gods want us to do this, like this gift of peace where there was violence, the threat of violence that will destroy our community. This new sense of peace is a gift from the gods. And so myths end up developing, stories end up developing out of this sacrifice, and myth is part of the religion that develops after the sacrifice. So you can see how the violence of sacrifice and the stories of myths are often there to justify the violence that we see in the world and the war of all, the sacrifice that ends up bringing some sense of peace, but not ever real peace, lasting peace, but only temporary peace until we have to do it all over again. And thus is the birth of religion. Oh man, my Girardian friends would be so upset with me for trying to tell that in 3 minutes. So that's okay. That's okay. So So yeah, learning about myth and fluidity could help regulate religious obligations. I'd have to hear more about that from you, Joshua. I like where you're going with it. Luke says we all open boxes sometimes in our lives. Oh, this is good. Going back to the coffin. What are you going to find in the box, Luke? Oh, this is good. Luke, we all open boxes sometimes in our lives and accidentally resurrect people for carnal pleasure. Oh, Jenny, woohoo, here we go. The carnal pleasure of opening up the box and seeing what's in it. And here we go. Surprise, surprise. Luke, we will pray for the collapse of the US dollar and for the general strike. We will pray for more justice in this world. Yeah, economic justice. Amy, good to see you. Hello to you, Amy. Good to see you. Uh, uh, Joshua, why fight when we can consensually spare? I wish that we could do that. I wish that we could do that, my friend. Goodness. Yeah, Joshua, myths are similar to ancient films. That's exactly it. Myths are, in one sense, myths are the ancient storytelling of the ancient world. They're often told to children as entertainment, and just like uh, entertainment today uh, gives us a worldview, right? There's so much talk about indoctrination today, and I hate that word because it's used by so many people in ways that are just so abusive and stuff. But stories are a way of teaching us without being conscious that we're being taught, and maybe we're not even conscious that we are teaching through these stories. But stories always give us a worldview about how the world works. And the myth of redemptive violence is the main story in town, including here in the United States. You go to a movie, and what's the way to solve problems? It's generally with violence, bigger, better violence. So there are some movies that break the mold. Um, the Gospels break the mold. The Bible is it always breaks the mold and goes back into the mold because that's what humans have doing forever. It's hard to break the mold and get away from the mold. So I believe that the Gospels break the mold, Jesus breaks the mold, but Christianity goes right back into the mold, goes right back into the coffin of death, right? And is it going to resurrect? Are we going to open that coffin and see it resurrect and have more love making in the world? Have more love in the world, right? Can we resurrect and get away from the desire for revenge and make love, not war, baby? Oh, Luke, you got me thinking about that imagery of the coffin and the metaphor of opening up the coffins in our lives and seeing what we will find. It's the amazing Mumford and Sons song. Roll away your stone and I'll roll away mine. Together we will see what we will find. Don't leave me alone at this time, for I'm afraid of what I will discover inside. That is Easter Sunday. That is resurrection right there. Open up your coffin, and what will you find? What will you find resurrecting from that coffin? And what is it going to say to you? Is it going to seek revenge? Or is it going to resurrect and say, peace, peace be with you? Oh, Princess, greetings to you, Jenny. Oh, yes, Jenny, Jenny. Here we go. Okay, so let's see. Jenny's got always great comments. Okay, so Rojava, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. The Kurdish autonomous zone in Syria understands this lesson from myth and religion completely. Whenever an act of violence takes place, even one that takes a life, the person who committed the act of violence may be imprisoned, but the families of the perpetrator and victims victim come together to break bread over a meal to stop the cycle of violence or bloodlines will carry that violence forward, ruining more and more lives. Oh, this is violence run out of control, Jenny. Oh my goodness, this is amazing. Amazing stuff. Restorative justice, not revenge, is important. And I wish more people understood that type of Jesus lesson. You and me both, my dear, wonderful atheist friend. I am so grateful for you. Joshua says, I've noticed people dismissing Jesus as a myth. Whether myth or legend, Jesus' story is likely to be the story to end all stories. Yeah. I I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not here to convince people that the Jesus story is not a myth. I'm just hoping that we see it as a different kind of story in the ancient world, one that repudiates revenge, right? And the more stories that we can tell like that, the better off we will be. You know who's really great at this if you're interested in more on like the stories that we tell today, is my friend. I've had him on the show before, Gareth Higgins. He has a book called Cinematic States, where he goes over movies that have more of this kind of story, this kind of gospel story that Joshua we're getting at. Yeah. So I like retelling the story, subverting the myth of redemptive violence with better stories, stories of forgiveness, stories of radical peace, stories that just, in some sense, like resist the desire for revenge and move into what Jenny is getting at, which is restorative justice. Powerful stuff. Yeah. Um, I love it. I love the way that you're all thinking about this. Oh, Jenny, I'm so glad that you have a home. I'm so glad that you are with us. You are just amazing. So Joshua says, Jesus mentioned the poor will always be with us. That being said, I believe that if those of us who are not poor can contribute a little in the way we are called to do so, then maybe a little can be good. Yeah, Joshua, that is an excellent point. And Jesus here is quoting Deuteronomy chapter 15, where it says, the poor will always be with us. And a first century Jew will know exactly what Jesus means by that, because they will know the context of Deuteronomy chapter 15. And the context is exactly what you have said, Joshua. Beautiful statement there. Deuteronomy 15. I believe that's where this is, where this quote is found. Deuteronomy 15 says, "The uh, give to anyone who is in need, give without being begrudgingly giving, right? Uh, for the poor you will have with you always. And so always give to the poor. And the basic sense is that so everybody will have their basic needs met, right? That's what this is about. And so, Joshua, when you say that being said, I believe that if those of us who are not poor can contribute a little in the way we are called to do so, then maybe a little can be good. That is exactly what the biblical rationale for that quote is, and what Jesus's rationale for that quote is too. The poor you will have with you all with us. The poor will always be with us. Is not a statement that God has created the world to be this way, but much more of a statement that uh, your culture is messed up if you have poor people with you. Because Deuteronomy says there should be no poor in the nation, because you should be having, here I'm going to get accused of being a Marxist, you should have good distribution of wealth among the people. That is straight before Marxism. That is Deuteronomy. That is what Deuteronomy is saying, that you should be living in a culture where there are no poor people among you, because you should be caring for people, but you're going to refuse to do that. So the poor you will have with you always. It's like when God brings the people out of Egypt, the Israelites out of Egypt, and they complain because they have no food, and God's like, all right, I'll send down manna from heaven, and all you have to do is share. That's it. So I'm going to give it to you 6 days. On the seventh day, I'm not going to send manna, but you are going to have enough manna for everybody on that seventh day because you're going to share, right? Well, eventually what happens is that people start hoarding the manna for themselves because they don't trust that there is enough for everybody. Is this sounding familiar to any of you for modern 20th, 21st century economics and fear that there's not enough? Like, we are trained to be afraid that there's not enough. So you need to get yours and hoard it for yourself, which means others can't participate in the abundance that is already here. That was happening. And the warning of that was happening early on in the Bible. The first couple of books are all about what you learn in kindergarten, which is there's enough and just share and everybody will be okay. But the poor you will have with you always, not because God has made it this way, but because you're going to refuse to share. And by you, I mean our culture, human culture always runs this way. We have our own systems for it running this way, capitalism, but no economic system is perfect. But we can do a lot more to do a lot better by all of us, especially the poor who are with us. And Joshua, thank you for bringing that up. Jenny says, feels like myths are expositions of human psychology. Yes, yes, Jenny, I love the way you put it there. That's exactly it. Who was it that wrote that did all of that myth study in the mid 20th century? Oh man, why can't I remember his name? The Mask of a Thousand Faces. Is that what one of the books is? Joseph Campbell. If I keep talking, it's going to come to me, people. So here we go. Yeah, Joseph Campbell was kind of the first to really dive into the myths as exposition of human psychology. I would love to do a lot more research into that. Maybe sometime in my life I'll have time, Jenny. I love it. Explanations. Okay, feels like myths are explanations of human psychology. Expositions worked really well too, but explanations, yeah, I love that, Jenny. Excellent. Joshua says, fake news from antiquity, mindless revenge and violence will heal everything. This is sarcasm. Fake news. Joshua says, yes, 20th century introduced a method of telling mythical stories through entertainment, in my humble opinion. Yep. Joshua also says, yes, the 20th. Oh, here we go. That's a repeat. That's good. Yeah, be scared of Marxism. Ooh. Melanie, hi. Sorry I missed the show. Melanie, I would love to know what you think of the show, my friend. If you wouldn't mind watching it, maybe, put it on double speed. I think Facebook has the double speed option now. Is that right? At least they had it before. And maybe it is still there. Yeah, watch it on double speed. Love to know what you think, Melanie, later today when we talk, if you're coming later today. So yeah, Jeff, thank you. Joseph Campbell. That's exactly who I was thinking of. So everybody, that is it for today's show. Hope you enjoyed it. This has been What is the Bible a Myth Part 2. So maybe we'll do a Part 3. I don't know. I'm a little maybe. I don't know. Are you interested in Myth Part 3? Maybe we'll see. I don't know. But anyway, thank you for being here, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you for your comments and questions. If you are listening on the podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, thank you for making it this long. Always good to know that you are there. If you are listening on a podcast, or hey, even if you don't listen on a podcast and you can give a review wherever there are podcasts, that you can do that. iTunes, that would help out a lot. If you're watching on YouTube and you think somebody might be interested in this, if you could share. Or if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, I'll post this later on YouTube. If you could share it with somebody that you think might be interested, that would help out the show a lot too. Mostly, it's just always a joy to be here to talk about these things with you all. We do this live on the Pastor Adam Facebook page and the Clackamas UCC Facebook page at 11 o'clock on Thursdays, and would love for you to join us live if you can. If you can't and you have a comment or a question that you want to explore, feel free to put that in on Facebook or YouTube, or send me an email, or wherever you find me on social media. We'll try to get those in. So thank you, everybody. This has been a product of the Raven Foundation, the Religion and Nonviolence Education Network. You can go check out ravenfoundation.org. I didn't quite make it. I've told you the last month that I'm working on an ebook for Raven that explores religion and nonviolence. And I was hoping to have it done by the end of May. And hey, guess what? It's June 1st. Happy June 1st, everybody. The ebook is not done yet, but hopefully by the middle of the month, we'll have it done. And I missed the deadline. I'm sorry. I'll try to do better next time. So I'm going to be exploring religion, violence, and nonviolence through Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. I've done some work on it. I'm very excited about it, and hopefully can get it to you soon. So thank you all. Hope you have a great rest of the day. And Jeff says, can we do Mithra next? We might do some Mithra next. I would also like to do Dionysus at some point. So yeah, Jeff, you've got me thinking. So we can do it. So, oh, Melanie, you can't make it later today. That's okay. Okay. Hope you have a great time with your cousin. And all right, everybody. So hope you have a great rest of your week. And until next Thursday, God be with you, friends.